Turf Talk with Drew Miller.
On this week's episode of Tiger Turf Talk, we host Dr. Chase Straw, Assistant Professor at Texas A&M University with the Turfgrass Science Department. This was such a phenomenal episode. We learned so much about the research that Dr. Straw is working on and really seeing the difference and what a game changer it could be for sports turf and golf course managers all across the world. It was also an awesome episode because our co-host Franco Allegro actually is hoping to attend Texas A&M in the coming years and has met Dr. Straw on a visit and was able to discuss the opportunities that are available for him and for other students like him at Texas A&M, and how the Turfgrass Science Department is one of the last Turfgrass Science Departments solely in the U.S., which is an awesome and incredible thing to understand with all your crops and soil and your horticulture schools that all these programs across the country are in. And it's definitely an episode you don't want to miss, so be sure to listen to this episode of Tiger Turf Talk. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 45th episode of Tiger Turf Talk. I'm your host, Drew Miller, with your co-host, Franco Allegro. Today we have on an incredible guest. We have Dr. Chase Straw of Texas A&M. He is an assistant professor with the Turfgrass Management program. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, thank you for coming on. So I learned about you from Dan Sandor. I believe he was a coworker of yours at Minnesota, correct?
That's correct. Yep. We shared an office. He was my office mate.
I'm sure that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. We as fun as it can be in an office.
I was gonna say sharing an office with anybody's got to be difficult, you know.
Yeah.
So hopefully it was good. But he has sung your praises so many times with all the work that you've done towards sports turf and golf and just making things better. You just recently were hired by Texas A&M, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I was hired in February of last year, about 2 weeks before everything shut down. So it was very interesting start to my career. Yeah,
there's a lot of people that happened to where they just moved in and then COVID just said no.
Yep. Then that happened to me. So it was great.
Yeah. I'm sorry. But you were just talking about it. You were appointed to a 70% research, 30% teaching. Can you sort of discuss how you kind of found your way down the path of research and higher education? Because you do have a background in the field that has led you back to education. Could you sort of speak to what your journey was and how you found yourself back in research and focusing on bettering the industry as a whole?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I kind of laughed because you had Weston Applefeller on here, I know, in the past, and he's a good friend of mine. So yeah, as an undergrad, I went to the University of Kentucky. Big UK fan. I know Dr. Goatley there, Virginia Tech is as well. I'm not bold enough to deck my office out in Kentucky gear yet, but it's coming eventually. Yeah, so I did my undergrad in Kentucky, and it was just a coincidence, honestly. My high school assistant basketball coach, I grew up around the Lexington area. He was the head sports field manager at Kentucky. So as soon as I was graduating high school, I was kind of undecided on what I wanted to do. I honestly wasn't even looking at Kentucky because, quite honestly, I didn't have that good grades. But he said, if you get into Kentucky, you come work on the grounds crew with me. And I'm like, that sounds great. So I applied to the university, got accepted. Immediately started working on the grounds crew, like as soon as I graduated high school. Did that all through my undergrad, all 4.5 years of Kentucky. I didn't declare the major until about a year in to Kentucky, but yeah, I just fell in love with sports turf, sports field management, and that's how I got into it. And then when I was there, I did internships with the Boston Red Sox twice, and that's where I met Weston Applefeller, and then also with the Cincinnati Bengals with the late great Darren Daly, who was a really big mentor of mine. Yeah, and then it was my time in Cincinnati, so I worked for the Bengals a little bit after I graduated. Still part-time, but it was there where a group of researchers from the University of Tennessee came up, and they were visiting and touring the facilities, and I was kind of helping with the tour. And I was introduced to graduate school through one of their extension professors, turfgrass extension professors, Tom Samples. If anybody's ever met him, he's a very energetic guy. Makes you feel great about yourself. And he made me feel like I could be an excellent graduate student with my background, and really got me interested in the research and the graduate school component. A problem with that was my undergraduate GPA was not very good at all. So I had a difficult time getting into graduate school. I was fortunate that Gerald Henry at Texas Tech at the time took a chance on me. And then he ended up moving to Georgia, University of Georgia, and I was able to follow him, which is where I did my master's and ultimately my PhD. I feel very fortunate being under him because he kind of opened up doors for me to really do what I wanted. And that's kind of what I've been able to do ever since I've been, in higher education and doing research. Is I've been fortunate enough to work under people between Gerald as my graduate advisor, and then Brian Horgan, who's at the University of Minnesota. He's now the department head at Michigan State. They really allowed me to do what I was interested in, which I know we'll talk about later. But yeah, that's really how I got into it. And once I went down the path of graduate school, I pretty much knew immediately that academia was what I wanted to do, primarily just because of they call it academic freedom. You get to research and do what you're interested in. I had worked in the MLB, I had worked in the NFL, I had worked in Division I college athletics. I could certainly have seen myself do that, but I really liked the questioning of doing experiments and the research aspect of it, and that's really what drove me to the position I'm in now.
And I couldn't agree with you more. The questioning and sort of, I guess, challenging is probably a good word for it, of what the norm is and what the expectations are is huge. You've done a lot of research on a lot of different areas. What is it that you're interested in figuring out? Like, what is it that you're trying to research to find answers to again, maybe make our lives easier as turf managers, or just, again, something you're interested in? And the academic freedom aspect is awesome because a lot of people have those restrictions to them, but being able to find what you're passionate about and discovering the solution or the reason for the problem, what's that like for you? And what is that process kind of like, maybe proposing that research that you're going to start?
So I was fortunate when I was a graduate student to get a device handed to me called the Precision Sense. The mobile device collects a bunch of data all at once, and then it creates these maps of all these different variables that it measures. And I was fortunate that I got my hands on that device for my graduate research, and then it opened up this whole concept to me of precision turfgrass management. Identifying variability within turfgrass landscapes and then developing management strategies to improve it. And that was the concept that a former professor there at Georgia was working on, the very early phases of it. And I took that concept and then my interest, which was sports field management, and I met with professors in other departments, kinesiology, for example, who did work with athletes. And my goal there was just to try to tie all of this stuff together, all the data about the fields, the variability that can occur within a natural turfgrass field, and then how athletes interact with it. And not just from an injury standpoint. And injuries, they obviously get the most attention in athlete surface interaction research, but when I was in Minnesota, I worked with a sports psychologist. So there's a huge psychology component to different athletic fields and different athletic field properties. There's a performance the way that athletes perform, which is something that I don't think has gotten a ton of consideration as of yet in our industry. And then there's obviously the injuries. So really just tying together those athlete components with the field components, and then taking it to another level of within field variability and how fields can change within the field, and then between field, or how a field changes over time and how athletes interact with that field, was a big interest of mine, and still is a big interest of mine. That's a major part of my research, is those types of athlete surface interactions. And right now, I know we'll talk about it here later with some of your other questions, but right now, sensor technologies are a big thing right now, with wearable sensors. And how can we use some of this athlete data that we can now obtain through wearable sensor technology, and correlate that with field conditions to see the interactions there. So some exciting stuff in the sports field world. And then obviously I do just general maintenance type deals. And all of that stuff is just industry driven. I try to get out to, a lot of the local and regional and national conferences and hear what turfgrass managers are saying about different aspects of things. One, for example, PGRs on sports fields. Looking at different rates, reapplication intervals, do you start or stop before a season? Things like that. It's just kind of what you hear. I try to send out a lot of fillers, so I'll send out little polls on Twitter or just locally through our associations, and just say, hey, what are some research interests right now, whether it be golf or sports fields, and that can drive it as well as far as what I'm looking at. So that's really it. The industry drives it all, and then obviously the environmental standpoint, especially in golf. A lot of my work in golf, under that umbrella of precision turf management, is how can we use some of these newer technologies, drones, the mobile device, like I've talked about, to map variability and do target applications or variable rate applications from an environmental standpoint to reduce inputs, not only cost, but obviously environmental inputs as well, or impact as well.
With turfgrass researchers and professors, many of them don't have a lot of experience in the industry, unlike you, who has actually worked for MLB and NFL. Could you discuss the impact that this has on your research and how you might be solving some of the problems you faced as a sports turf manager?
Yeah, definitely. It's had a huge impact on me. Going back to my thing about Weston Apfelfeller, I don't think I ever really finished that. It's funny, when I got this job, we were in New York for an MLS meeting, and I was speaking, and he was introducing me, and he said that I was probably the last person he ever thought would be a professor during just from my time as an intern with the Red Sox with him. My GPA suffered as an undergrad, but my experience, I would compare my resume as an undergrad to anybody at that time. It really opened my eyes up, especially now that I'm doing research on like what matters. You can easily, that whole academic freedom and doing what you want to do, you can easily get these crazy ideas, and trust me, I have plenty of them. But these ideas that don't really matter, it's like, oh, you want to do this, and even some of the stuff that I do right now probably might not matter now, especially with like new technology. Some of the stuff's really hard to implement now, especially from an adoption standpoint. A lot of people can't do some of the things that I do, but nonetheless, it should become hopefully more common in the future. But you get down this rabbit hole in research of doing stuff that might not matter. And I think having that practical experience has helped me a lot from a relationship standpoint. I mean, we all know this industry is small, tight-knit industry. So I'm able to reach out to people and actually talk with some of these ideas and ask them, is this, what would you do here? What would you do there? Is this even worth pursuing? How would you do this or that differently? So it's been a huge advantage from that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, even Darren Daly, when I worked at the Bengals, he would tell me he was one of those guys that, he's really open to research and really enjoyed being around research and talking research, and he embraced it. But he would always tell me that you can't see everything in a 5 foot by 5 foot plot, and you got to kind of get out and see things with your own eyes. And I think that kind of translates now to what I do, because a lot of my research is on site, large scale, not really small plot. I do quite a bit of small plot research too, and there's definitely value in it. But it just kind of opened my thought process of how to conduct research and how to do research with some of the background and experience that I had in some of my other positions, definitely.
Continuing on that research subject, a majority of your research focuses on the betterment of practices in sports turf and golf course managers. Could you discuss the different projects you have been working on and how they're continuing the research in these areas?
Yeah, so I do a lot of industry trials, as does probably a lot of research turfgrass professors. So herbicide efficacy type deals. And then the sports field research, I kind of already touched on some of them with the athlete wearable sensors. That's kind of the route I'm going now. This year, we're doing some exciting stuff. I'm working with a professor in our kinesiology department who's developed a hydration sensor. So even in Texas, where it's pretty easy to grow grass, artificial turf is still kind of increasing as far as installations, which is understandable. It has a place, but it's still interesting to see the whole dynamic between heat. Everybody tweets out the pictures of the infrared thermometer and grass and artificial turf. And, they get pretty hot. I think it's time, and I'm kind of shocked that it honestly hasn't been done, at least to my knowledge, that nobody's really looked at hydration between the two and how athletes, at what rate they dehydrate between the two surfaces. So we're fortunate we developed a study. We got funding to initiate some hydration work between the artificial and natural grass fields here on campus, starting here later in the summer. So we're excited about that. I have a graduate student. He's really good. Did his undergrad at Tennessee under John Sorokin. He's here doing his master's. He's the one that's doing a lot of the sensor work on athletes and trying to compare some of the field characteristics to athlete performance characteristics. And then in the golf world, I do a lot of golf irrigation. So mapping soil moisture across large areas like fairways, utilizing the individual head control that some of the golf courses have to do site-specific or variable rate irrigation. So we have ongoing studies up in Minnesota for my postdoc, and we're getting ready to initiate one here in Texas as well. And then trying to move into some variable rate fertility type work. So we have a GPS sprayer currently, and I'm hoping to get a GPS spreader, which is going to be kind of cool to do some variable rate stuff with granular fertilizers. So yeah, those are the big projects right now. Then some kind of smaller scale PGRs. I talked about some PGRs. We're doing some zoysia grass, traffic tolerance. We have a breeder here in Vika Chandra who breeds some zoysia grasses. So we have some experimental, commercially available zoysia grasses that we're trying to do some traffic testing with. So yeah, we're pretty busy.
So I'm gonna go there with you with the artificial turf, and I think that's incredible what you're doing, because a lot of people don't think about that aspect of it. I mean, as turf managers, a lot of things are like, well, injury wise, this is why you would prefer that, but I think a lot more kids suffer from that dehydration, because when you think about a high school football team on an artificial turf field, they're doing two-a-days in the weather that we have right now, which is again 100 plus. Again, the infrared sensor is 170 degrees to 150 usually is where that number's at. What is it about artificial turf that you've researched, whether it was injuries, whether it's what you're doing now? What are the different tests that you think could go further beyond this? And how do you think that's going to play a role in, again, you say even in Texas where it's supposed to be easy to grow grass, again, not saying that, please don't come after me, anybody who's, especially after the winter you just had. But how is it going to play a role in sort of that, again, that dynamic of artificial turf fields going in while these issues keep popping up from, again, heat stroke, injuries with lower leg extremities, stuff like that. In comparison to your research on natural grass, because I think I saw a video where you were running a trial. Again, you were talking about the characteristics of how an athlete interacts with the surface of a natural grass playing field, not just for injury purposes, but just overall. I'm sorry if that wasn't the best worded question, but sort of dive into that aspect of your research.
So artificial turf fields, and, I've honestly I've stayed away from them until now, really, with this heat aspect. And I don't even know where this is going to go. To be honest, I hope it's we see some differences. I would anticipate some differences. It's a somewhat preliminary study that we're going to be conducting to validate the sensors that they've developed. But nonetheless, I think it could potentially be pretty big, especially if these sensors work, because then we could do the study at a more larger scale. Right now, it's kind of a small scale, looking at just one team and two fields, obviously Bermuda grass and artificial turf. So it'd be good, obviously, to have it at a larger scale. I was fortunate to just hop on a paper recently. We did recently publish a paper at the University of Tennessee, and then Adam Tomes at Iowa State, on artificial turf fields, infield depth, and surface hardness. And I wasn't involved in the data collection of that study, but essentially they went out, they measured infield depth and surface hardness of 12 artificial turf fields in Tennessee and in North Georgia. And all of the fields ranged in different ages, from brand new to 10 years old. And what we found was kind of what we expected, was as the field gets older, they get harder, and the infield depth gets less. There's less infield depth. And it's mainly because of the carry-off effect, right? Of athletes, things get stuck in their shoes. It just moves around. And, I think that's it. It's not, I don't think it's a groundbreaking finding. I think we would anticipate, just based on anybody who manages an artificial turf field, that they change over time. But I think it opens up some questions, like, can we manage these differently throughout their lifetime? I don't know how frequently it's recommended to reapply infill on an artificial turf field, but maybe instead of doing a blanket infill, we only target certain areas so that we maintain a certain height of infill across the entire field. Rakes are becoming really common now. Brushing, I know, is probably the most common, but with the different rakes that are available now, especially for Bermuda grass down here in Texas, as kind of an alternative to verticutting. I'm hearing more people use those on their artificial turf fields as well, just to get down in there a little bit deeper than a brush. So it really opens the door for different maintenance practices on artificial turf fields. And if you maintain it early on, more site specifically, or those trouble areas within the field, can then improve the longevity of an artificial turf field. From a heat standpoint, I know Penn State's done some work on that in the past, as far as looking at how you can cool it down. I'm not there yet in my research. I know the industry, the company is starting to dabble. The artificial turf companies are dabbling in different infill materials. The fibers themselves get hot, and then obviously the rubber contributes to the heat as well. But currently right now is not an area of my research.
I was gonna ask about the infill with you, because I didn't know if you had done enough research into the types of infill. I was just down in Fredericksburg, Virginia. They just installed the same exact field as the Diamondbacks with the coconut infill. And a lot of people, they might be people just talking, but they say that the coconut actually reduces the heat. And in my experience of being down there twice now, it has not reduced any heat. It's still extremely hot. I'm like, it's the fibers, it's the plastics that heat up, Also, it hurts. Like I don't remember what I did, but I for some reason slid down on my knee and I was like, whoa, what is this? Like, and I forget it's crushed coconuts. Like, I don't even want to imagine what that's like when it's frozen, you know?
Yeah.
Do you see any other big changes to kind of that aspect? And again, it might not be a great question because you probably you saying you weren't doing a lot of research on that, but I mean, I thought that was insane that they were going to coconut over rubber because you have two completely different like materials and like the characteristics are the exact opposite of each other, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I have, honestly, I just have little experience with it right now. I am familiar with the coconut. And if you go to some of their websites, there's actually a surprisingly high number of options of different infill materials with some of them, with some of the companies. But yeah, I just don't have a ton of experience with
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, I was just curious if you did because we actually went I was with Dan actually. We were at a field day and they were talking about infill and the impact that the pads that they've been putting underneath have on that infill. You know, some people think that since you have the pad, you can compensate with less infill, and it's caused major issues for the turf's longevity. You know, so it's definitely interesting to listen to and hear about. Um, with everything, you were just talking about variability having a big role in a turf manager's job. And a lot of your work focuses on that, whether it's in sports, golf, or any really aspect of what we do culturally speaking. Could you sort of speak to why that's a focus of yours and it's a repetitive thing throughout your research and how that's going to benefit, again, the sports turf managers in Texas moving forward, you know?
Yep. Yeah. So on a sports field, um, it just, there's a lot of things to talk about with sports fields. The sports field, I mean, we know that we know that certain areas of the field receive more traffic than other areas of the field. So opposite of golf, which I'll talk about here in a minute, where we can significantly reduce impacts and environmental impacts, reduce costs for things, because it's just a large area. On sports fields, we have a potential opportunity to improve the longevity of the field and safety of the field and just improve the athlete surface interactions, whether that be from a performance or an injury standpoint. So yeah, variability is definitely a big thing that I've worked on because it hasn't been considered that much in earlier research. So it's kind of just a niche area. And some of the studies that I've done have been small scale, where we've only looked at a few teams, few fields, but nonetheless, I think they're really interesting. So the injury study that I did at Georgia, we had a club sports field, natural grass, where 8 club sports teams play on one field. So, it's highly variable. You have really wet areas, you have really dry areas, you have compacted areas, non-compacted areas. And, we monitored where injuries occurred on the field throughout their playing seasons. And we saw a trend that injuries were occurring in the wettest areas of the field. And then also in the areas with the lowest turf quality, which is kind of what we would expect. But the most interesting thing is when we would map those variables on the field and we would overlay where the injuries happened with these heat maps that we created, soil moisture and NDVI or turf quality. Injuries were happening along the edges of these. So there would be a big blob of like a wet spot. And the injuries would happen along the edges of those blobs pretty frequently. And it really made us think like maybe it's not the blob itself that's causing the injury, it's the continuous transitions from these high and low valued areas throughout a field and the athlete having to change throughout the field that could be causing the lower extremity injury. Now, it was a 2-year study on like 3 teams, so it's obviously very preliminary, but nonetheless, pretty interesting question or result. And then once I got up to Minnesota, and then in Georgia as well, we did interviews with athletes. So we interviewed the same athletes on this field, and athletes were able to identify these high and low valued areas, these good and bad areas. And most of them said that they would adjust their behavior in certain areas of the field based on the field conditions. So there's a big psychological component to it as well. And then up in Georgia, we were able to slap GPS sensors on their back. So that was awesome. So now, okay, they said that they would perform differently in certain areas of the field. Let's actually measure and see if they do. So with rugby and soccer, we did a study on each team, 1 year, 1 season for each team. And we basically just looked at team speed. So how fast were they running in certain areas of the field? And interestingly enough, once again, soil moisture and turfgrass quality, which we measured through a variable called NDVI. Those were the 2 variables that influenced team speed the most. So whenever the athletes were in the wettest areas of the field, they ran slower. And then whenever they were in the areas with actually the highest turf quality, they ran slower. And, I attribute that highest turf quality running slower to, you just have a lusher, it was a Kentucky bluegrass field, you just have a lusher turf, so it probably slows you down. And soccer, probably something to do with the ball roll, right? But we saw it in rugby as well. So, really interesting results. And that kind of goes back to these wearable sensors. I think all these injury studies that have been conducted, now we have this performance data. A lot of the wearable sensors, at least the ones that we've used, have surveys that we can do a pre and post match survey with the athletes, so we can know how much sleep that they have before they perform. After a match, we can do what's called a rated perceived exertion. So how fast or how hard do they think they went for that day? You can have custom questions where you can ask them different things about their perception of the field. So there's all this data that we can get now to go along with just the injury, and then also tie in the field data. We can tie in all of these different pieces of data, and it's tough, and we're definitely nowhere close yet, but the possibilities of really kind of nailing down specific field variables, athlete conditions that could lead to injuries or a decrease in performance, and then manipulate the field to improve performance or reduce injuries, that's the ultimate goal. I totally forgot your question, so hopefully that answered.
That was incredible. That's
So that
awesome.
was the sports. Yeah, if you want to keep talking about sports, we can, and then I'll go into golf.
What I'm thinking right now is where did we come up with all the different aspects that you guys just did? It's crazy to think about how, again, you're connecting the field to the athlete, and then the characteristics of the athlete impacting the way the field is impacting their play. But yeah, you can continue. I'm sorry. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it, but it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me because, you want to do this at such a large scale to where the results are meaningful and definitive. But I think even all these little studies that I've done in the past and the ones that I have ongoing, I think, it adds to a pile of other studies that other people have done, which is what I wrote a review paper on recently, on how this variability within natural turfgrass fields influence athletes from an injury, psychology, performance standpoint. But once you have this big pile of all these smaller studies, then you can start really figuring out, okay, here's what they're seeing, here's what they're seeing. There's common trends going on, and then you can really narrow down what might be causing some of the influences. But yeah, really exciting stuff, and we continue to build on it. So in Minnesota, we built on some of the research I did in Georgia by adding the GPS sensor to an athlete to where we can track their speed and distance measurements. And then here at A&M, we've added an ankle IMU sensor so that whenever athletes run or jump, we can measure basically the forces that are applied back to the athlete. And I have a graduate student who's working on that. But a ton of data. Not only the field data, but all this athlete data. It's really hard to manage. So we're still working through that as well. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about the sports field stuff. And then on the golf side, what was the original question? Just so I don't go off on too much.
No, we love tangents, but it was all about variability and how it's
variability.
what you're focusing on to understand. Again, you just took 75 variables and connected it to one thing. So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Variability, that's right. Yeah, so it's very similar to sports, the sports field stuff. When I started in Minnesota with my postdoc, I basically inherited a precision irrigation study in golf. And, it was a really eye-opening study that we're still actually doing, where, I had not done that much golf research and I didn't have that much experience on a golf course because obviously I worked in the sports field my whole undergrad career. But, so a lot of golf courses now have the capabilities of individual head irrigation control. But a common theme when you go around, and then still to this day, when I speak at conferences, I always ask, how are you irrigating your fairways? There's 28 to 30 acres of fairways on average on a course. So that's a lot of area that gets irrigated. And majority of them still have their heads set to the same time. They still do a blanket. Now, some might adjust the percentages up and down to where some areas receive more or less water, but they're still irrigating everything. And with our soil moisture sensor technologies and drones are becoming more and more common. And I'm not saying that you can use a drone for irrigation decisions. Don't quote me on that because there's some research going on with that. But they're a useful tool and they can be used for some decisions and can definitely play a role in some irrigation decisions. But with soil moisture sensor technologies in general, we can now make more informed decisions with the in-ground soil moisture sensors that are stationary, and then as well as your POGOs and your TDRs on large areas like fairways. And a lot of them now are GPS equipped so that you can map soil moisture variability. And then you can adjust your irrigation program based on that variability. And what we're seeing in Minnesota, we've completed 1 year of a precision irrigation study where we're basically comparing precision irrigation to where we're irrigating based on soil moisture variability. So the dry areas are going to get irrigated more frequently than the wet areas, but we're never going to do a blanket application. We're utilizing that individual head control and only irrigating certain spots using soil moisture sensors. Comparing that method to just a traditional method of what the superintendent always does, and we're seeing significant water savings, very significant water savings with that method. Now, it's difficult with the technology that we have now because we're fortunate we have the mobile device that can measure and map soil moisture very rapidly. I developed a soil moisture mapping protocol when I was in Minnesota where you could go out with a TDR 350 handheld one and do it. But that I get a lot of funny looks whenever I do a talk and throw that out there. Perfect intern job. Just it takes a day to do, but you walk your course, you walk your fairways, and you map your soil moisture, and it tells you how to set up your irrigation zones to implement precision irrigation. But still, that's a limitation. The labor issues in our industry, data is not always top priority, which I totally get. So there's some things we have to overcome in the golf industry for that to be adopted, but I think there's a huge potential there for water savings. And that's my big thing right now. I really want to move into variable rate fertility, which is kind of what I mentioned as well. And I think that's where drones could have a potential, could be potentially useful also. Some of the measurements that a drone can obtain, some of the spectral reflectances, can be affected by a lot of different things, not just moisture or fertility. But nonetheless, I think they can target you to a certain area and kind of help create those variable rate zones or site-specific management zones. I haven't dabbled in it. I'm starting to dabble in it. I haven't done anything with it yet, but that's what a lot of my golf work is on, is just mainly fairways, large areas, site-specific and variable rate research. I've worked a little bit with Dave McCall. I don't know if I'm sure you've gotten to meet him at Virginia Tech. He's doing some really cool stuff with fungicides and drones. So yeah, all that stuff is it's new to me once I started my postdoc, but I've really enjoyed getting involved in the golf industry. Obviously lean a little bit towards the sports, but I'm actually starting to kind of balance out to where I do kind of half my work in golf and half the work in sports field now.
As a golfer, I think that's really cool. You had mentioned earlier that you've been working with GPS spray rigs. Could you discuss some of the different implications these have for the future of the turf grass industry?
Yeah, I think they're a game changer. And I had never used one until I got here, and I was fortunate enough to buy one. And we didn't buy a brand new one. We retrofitted it with a company out of Minnesota or maybe Wisconsin. And it's been great, and it was pretty affordable. I thought relative to a brand new GPS sprayer is definitely affordable. But we have 8 acres of maintained turf at our research facility. We have 25 5,000 square foot plots, and we've been able to map out every single one of those plots to where with our GPS sprayer, we can go out there and say we want to spray plot 8, 9, and 10, and we can lower the booms, turn it on, and it won't spray until it's in those plots. And that's a huge advantage, I think, spraying things like greens, obviously. The overlap capabilities, I think, is just a game changer. We know the exact amount that we're spraying every single time that we spray, because the overlaps are consistent. Nozzles shut off, whenever you overlap too much. You still get a little bit, but it's not as bad as it could be. But we've gotten it down to where we put in however much we want to spray, and at the end we have literally like a little bitty handful of what's left. So I mean, the efficiency of just basic spray applications is going to be a game changer. And anybody who's considering a GPS sprayer, if you can afford it, you should get it. If you can't afford it, you should justify trying to get it because it will save you money in the long run. And then to take it another step further, which is what some of the research that I do, is incorporating some of these maps that I've talked about. We've done some work with incorporating soil moisture maps for targeted wetting agent applications. We're looking at that in sports fields. Since soil moisture we're finding to be a big driver of variability in sports fields, so we're seeing if we can maybe do some targeted wetting agent applications or even blanket wetting agent applications and see if they, at different rates, to see if they improve the uniformity of the field relative to not giving wetting agent. So I think that's the future, is incorporating some of these maps for targeted applications. And then even beyond that is the variable rate. And I think that's big as well. And I've spoken, been involved with some companies that have done some variable rate fungicide applications. It kind of just goes back to the whole point of why are we making a blanket application when we only have an area of a fairway that has disease? Why are we spraying, full rate in these areas, especially historically, if we know from our experience as a superintendent that these areas have very little to no disease? Why are we spraying the entire fairway? So yeah, GPS sprayers, I think, are game changers. I'm excited to have one. We have a lot of ideas for it. We don't have a ton of, we just got it, so we don't have a ton of ongoing projects, but we have a lot of ideas for it. And then the spreader, we're excited about getting the spreader eventually. I think there's a lot of potential with that as well. Obviously, just not liquid, more granular and different applications that we can do with that. So
I think the spreader, I know, again, don't get me wrong, the sprayer is definitely going to be big for the industry, but when you talk about spreaders for the high school level, you know what I mean? There are a lot of people that can't afford those sprayers and can't afford applications like that, we don't have one with our program. We always contract out, and that can get pretty expensive just for an application. So those spreaders could be huge for so many people in all areas of the industry, even landscaping and all that. I did have a question with the moisture readings for the golf courses. Have you ever talked to Spio? I think that's the name, right?
yeah, Spia.
Would that maybe have an implication eventually with that sort of again, single head, being able to work with that? Have you worked with them at all or anything like that, or thought of working with them with, again, placing it on say a fairway, and specific locations?
We've certainly talked to them, especially with some of the work that we're doing in Texas. I think my research associate is actually talking to them right now. I had a meeting with them this morning. So yeah, we try to talk to several companies, but you're right about that's exactly the soil moisture sensors I'm talking about.
Okay, that's what I was curious about. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you got it. Those in-ground soil moisture sensors, basically. So going out and doing like a mapping using a TDR 350 that has a GPS or a POGO that has a GPS and mapping these large areas to identify where to put those in-ground sensors, and then
Absolutely.
sticking the sensors in the ground so that you have that continuous measurement of that area that's going to be representative of other areas across your whole forest.
Yeah.
And then gearing your irrigation to that.
And eventually, like, again, if you were to, again, if research shows like the mutual beneficial like relationship between the irrigation and the sensor, I mean, there could be big implications for irrigation companies in the future working with, again, that sensor and including that in their packages and whatnot. So I think that's incredible. The other thing, with the mapping, we know Dr. McCall really well. He was my professor when I was at Tech, and he actually drove a couple of our kids around on a GPS sprayer when we visited Blacksburg. So, with the mapping, would that be mainly drones, or would you be doing mapping and, like you were talking about, the TDR and whatnot, for the trials you're talking about with your, I think you said herbicides and a couple other things? Would that be more drone based, or are you more of a walking around trying to map out that way?
I think from a practical standpoint, it'll end up being drone based for sure. And Dave's doing some really cool stuff with just the raw imagery of the drone and identifying the disease pressure. Spring dead spots is big disease. And so, yeah, I think as our imaging processing and our spectral reflectances and all those measurements we can really narrow down on specific stresses rather than just basically what we have now, which is just a stress index in general, but we don't really know exactly what's causing the stress. As that continues to improve, drones are obviously going to be the way to go because they're just more practical and you can fly it very quickly. But yeah, I mean, right now, but regardless of how, that's a huge limitation to all this stuff right now, right? Is how we collect the data, getting the data and then processing the data. And I would hope that in the next 5 to 10 years, all of that would be much easier with the data collection and processing. But with that being said, the concepts and the actual application shouldn't change. So, right now we're mapping soil moisture the hard way with handheld soil moisture meters. Hopefully one day we can map soil moisture variability a lot easier and we can do all this stuff a lot easier. But the concept's still the same with variable rate irrigation or site-specific irrigation. So from a research standpoint, I always try to tell myself that. And whenever I talk to people, I always try to tell them that too, like, don't just shake your head at this now because it's going to get a lot easier, right? And I think in the future, drones, I think that's going to end up being, I would think, the most practical method. And some of these companies are going to be able to process the data very quickly for a superintendent or a sports field manager, get it in a format that you would need to import it, put it into your sprayer. And then honestly, I was blown away with the sprayer, at least the one we have. I mean, once you get your map into the sprayer, especially with the auto steer, if you get a brand new sprayer, I mean, it will literally do everything for you. There's nothing else you have to do beyond that.
Getting the Tesla of spray rigs,
Yeah, exactly. Fall asleep on it. So I mean, it's that's definitely the future, I think, is the drones. There's still a lot of work to be done, obviously.
You do a lot of research, but another major part of your job is being a turf educator for undergraduate students in the program at Texas A&M. Could you discuss the program and the faculty that makes up the program?
Yeah, definitely. So teaching has always been something why I wanted to go into academia as well. And I was very fortunate with all the mentors I had in the industry, but even academic wise, unfortunately, both of my professors at Kentucky have passed away, but David Williams and A.J. Powell. I was there for A.J. Powell's last year before he graduated. He's a big name in the sports field industry. And, they weighed a lot on me on kind of why I did what I did as an undergrad. And they were both so supportive and so excited whenever I told them I was going to go to graduate school. So yeah, they were just really big mentors. And I always told myself, I was like, if I ever become that, that's kind of who I want to be like. And so, I take advising very serious. I try to help students, but also give them the flexibility, obviously, to make their own decisions. I talked to a student earlier this week that's not having a great internship. And, it's tough because, you want to kind of be like the parent. I got 3 kids. So, the parent in me is saying, stick it out. But at the same time, he's telling me, like, I'm not learning anything and they're treating me bad. So it's like you got to kind of stick up for the kid and you got to try to figure out what's best for them. Sometimes it's a tough situation, but at the same time, the other side of that, there's kids that love their internship or have a blast. And, you love hearing, you love seeing them succeed and have fun in what they're doing. I told my wife when I got this position, like, I obviously don't want to speed up time, but, you see these older professors, like who I had, David Williams and A.J. Powell, who had turf students all over the country doing all these cool jobs, they're far in their career. And, I hope one day that I'm able to say that I had that too from Texas A&M, that we have students all over the country. And we do have students all over the country. They weren't mine, obviously. But, they came through the program when I was here, and I was fortunate to advise them. I love teaching the students. I teach 2 classes, upper level classes to mainly the seniors in the turf program. Both of my classes are very applied, which I think is a benefit to me with the experience that I have. One of them is turfgrass management systems. And one of them is just general turfgrass maintenance. So they're very applied courses. I think I've only taught each course once so far since I've been here. But I think the students so far have seemed to really enjoy it. I might bring in a different perspective, or at least I've been told I bring in a little bit different perspective than what's been done here in the past. So it's always encouraging to hear the students actually learn something. And hopefully they take some of it away when they graduate.
And I'm pretty much the same way, just a little bit different grade level, I guess is the best way to put it. What is it about Texas A&M that there's a draw to it? We have students here in Virginia, obviously again, I'm biased because I'm a Hokie, but Virginia Tech's kind of the easiest school to get to, whether it's cost and other things like that. What would be something that Texas A&M has that would be, again, I know the reason Franco's here is because he's very interested in attending Texas A&M for turf. So what is it about the program that would be something that our students would, again, have an incredible opportunity, and not in comparison to other schools, but what is it about Texas A&M that you think is the best opportunity for them?
Yeah, that's a tough question because I'm sure all universities offer something completely different. Just speaking from my own perspective, and I'm obviously super, super biased.
You deserve to, it's your life's work. You have to be biased, right?
I think that, if you're, I think we're doing some futuristic, from a research standpoint, we're doing the future of the industry type stuff here, I think. We have my colleague, Dr. Ben Worley, him and I, we've worked together pretty well since we've been here. And we're 2 different personalities probably in the industry. So you get a little bit different personalities there between us. Our research facility, we have anywhere from 6 to 8 students at one time working at our research facility with us. So, you get the hands-on experience. And it's really introducing the students to, the new trends in turf. And, I think that some of the work that I'm doing from a research standpoint is definitely out there. Some of it's way out there. But nonetheless, I feel like, in class, especially that I teach, I always end the semester with some of the research that we're doing, some of these crazy ideas, with slapping sensors on athletes and all this stuff. And to me, I think that's when I see the students really perk up, and we'll show them all these different testing devices we have, the GPS sprayers, all these different things and how they can be implemented, and talk about the research a little bit. And, all of them, they're like, wow, I didn't even think about that. And these are students that have worked on golf courses and they've already done their internships and stuff. And they're like, the things that you're doing from a research perspective, like it's just, it makes so much sense, but we're not really seeing it yet at the places we've worked, and it gets them excited. I hired my research associate. I was very fortunate. His name's Weston Floyd. He went to school here, but he was the sportsfield manager at the University of Texas, assistant sportsfield manager at the University of Texas. He came to my interview when I came here, and I'll never forget it, because at the time he worked for Texas, but he came up to me after and he's like, "You rejuvenated my love for turfgrass." Just talking about some of the research. And I'm like, "That's awesome." He's like, "If you ever have a job open, let me know." And funny enough, I hired him, and he's a home run hire. I mean, he's a game changer. He's going after his CSFM this year, so I don't think there's a lot of programs that have a research associate that have a CSFM on staff. So our students learn so much just from him. He has 16 years of experience in the industry. Just exposing people. I'm young, obviously, and I'm new to the position, but I feel like I have a pretty big network. I introduce the students to a lot of industry people. We have a lot of guest speakers in my class. So we really try to not only hammer home the agronomics and becoming a field manager, whether it be a home line, sports field, or golf course superintendent, but also the industry side of it. We pay a lot of attention to that side. Sales representatives, R&D, research and development, all of that stuff we try to touch on in our class as well, and introduce the students to actual people out there in the industry. So kind of building those connections. And then obviously we have a turf club, which most universities do. We try to get together on a regular basis during the semesters as a group and do things. We have an annual golf event, things like that. One charity event a year that we try to participate in usually. Unfortunately, we haven't done it since I've been here. We'll probably do it this upcoming year where we'll go resod somebody's yard or something. It's been a great place for me so far, but like I said, I'm obviously biased.
Speaking of opportunities provided from Texas A&M, I know that the school offers in-state tuition if you get $4,000 worth of competitive scholarship. Does the turf program offer any scholarships that count towards that competitive scholarship fund or no?
There is turfgrass scholarships, and that is a question for Mark Hall, who I believe you've talked to. And yes, I don't know the logistics of that totally, but there are a few opportunities for turfgrass students to get scholarships through our department.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that people knew that was an option from the school.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's another advantage here, and I'm sure there's other programs like this too. We have very strong support from my department head and from our department on our program. I don't know how much longer this will be, but right now we're one of the few universities left that still offer a turfgrass science major, where you actually major in turfgrass science and not plant and soil science or soil and crop science. It's actually turfgrass science.
Yeah, crop right here. This guy.
Yeah.
I think it's plant science now.
Yeah, that's what I am. And I don't know how much longer we'll be that way, because there's already conversations about grouping us in with some of the other disciplines. Yeah, no, that's what we said. But yeah, that's another kind of advantage now.
Bronco, I'm stealing your question. Sorry. You have some of the best sports turf managers on campus at Texas A&M, with Nick McKenna and his guys in the athletic grounds crew. What kind of relationship do you guys have? And have they helped in developing, again, you've been there such a short time. Have they helped develop maybe classes on the athletic facilities, stuff along those lines, maybe internships during the semester? Like you said, you worked at Kentucky. I worked at on the grounds for at Tech when I was there. That has added to the success of your students in your program.
Yeah, definitely. Craig and Nick, Craig Potts and Nick McKenna, they're obviously two of the best in the industry. We're very fortunate to have them. Yeah, our relationship is great. We do stuff all the time with them, really. And the nice thing about they're two totally different personalities. The good thing is you can call either one of them up, and they both know kind of the work that I do, and some of it's kind of crazy. And I can call them up at any time, and the fields are mine. They let me do what I want, and that's a huge advantage. Even from a recruiting standpoint, if I have a graduate student that is visiting, considering coming here, they really help, bring them in. They take the time and tour the facility and whatnot. But yeah, we do research over there. We've done some, uh, honestly, some crazy stuff. I'll get new technologies, like a company will reach out to me and say, "Hey, have you ever considered doing this?" And I'll be like, "Oh, maybe, I don't know. Let me call Nick and we'll do it on the baseball field or the football field." It's a huge advantage to be able to do that. I know not all places have that kind of relationship, but I mean, I can roll up into their baseball field, and I know Nick's going to be there, and he'll take the time to talk. Same with Craig over at softball or baseball or whatever. If I need them to speak to the class, they're always open to it. It's funny because I know Nick. I gave him a hard time when he was on here, whenever he was on here, because we all went for like 2 hours. I'm like, "Dang, Nick!" And then I bring the class over there and to talk about painting, and he talks to the class like an hour after class. I'm like, it's hard to got to book an extra hour if we're going to put you on.
He did say afterwards, he's like, "I think I got the record." I was like, "I think I got the record." And it was funny because John Ledwig over in Leicester City in England, he talked for like 2 less seconds, and I almost wanted to text him, like, "You got beat." And I was like, "Dang it." So he's got so much to offer too. That's what's crazy.
Yeah, his network. I mean, even just his status as the president of the STMA. I think that's huge for our program, for our undergraduate program. And I try to mention that to the students, just the importance of joining those associations and getting involved with it, and having the president here who can speak on it is obviously another advantage.
With this being your second year at Texas A&M, what are your future goals for the program moving forward?
Well, my first goal, which I have no responsibility of doing or no say in doing, is to get our extension position filled. So there should be 3 faculty here in College Station. Myself and Dr. Worley, who are the teaching research, and then we should have an extension position. And it's been open ever since I've gotten here, actually. So it would be nice to have a tandem of 3 of us here. I think it would help moving forward for several reasons. So hopefully that'll get filled in the near future. We'll see. From a research standpoint, just like any young professor, I hope make a national impact, international impact on some of the work that I'm doing. I feel like we're making some trends in the right direction with some of the stuff we're doing. I'd love to see the undergrad program grow. One of the things that it's been an eye-opening experience as a faculty, and I know you had Dr. Bertall in here too, and she spoke on some of these things and our responsibilities as a faculty member, especially research teaching with publications and grants and whatnot. And I wish that we could spend more time recruiting students. We more so deal with the students that are in the program, right? It's kind of up to the university to do the recruiting, and obviously trends are going down in a lot of programs. Even our program, we're healthy compared to some of the other programs across the country, but I'd love to get up in the 30s or 40s with our undergrad numbers. And I think we're going to start making a recruiting effort here in the near future. But to keep up with all these other responsibilities that I have as a researcher and teacher, it's really hard to find that time to recruit. But I'm hoping that some of the research that I do and some of the research that we're doing as a program, not just in College Station but also in Dallas, we can entice people like Franco to come, even out of state, even in state, get some students to come just because we're doing some good research, unique research. So yeah.
Hear that, Franco? You got to get that $4,000 in scholarship so you have in-state tuition.
I'll try.
With again the role as an educator and with so many students, again, you have more than most programs in the country. They turn to you for guidance and what their future sort of holds and how you can help them. And you sort of spoke to it a couple different times today about whether you connected them with industry professionals, taking care of them during their internships, whatever it is. What has that been like for you to be that mentor and, again, have that impact on, again, not just the future of the industry, but that person,
Yeah, it's it's the most fulfilling part of the job, honestly, because we write grants and write publications and they get rejected and you get comments back that don't make any sense or really kind of just a bummer. But to be able to, as long as you're a good mentor to these students and they respect you as an advisor and whatnot, and then they go on and be successful, there's a lot of just fulfillment, that I've done my job. And obviously I've only had one round of students. I think since I've been here, we've had probably 9 students graduate last year, between this 9 or 10. But I still stay in touch with probably half of them. And, one emailed me last week, and he's doing great. He's a head superintendent already in small course. But just hearing how good they're doing, and even just the small comments of I don't think I could be in this role right now if I hadn't taken your class, where I really learned something in your class, and it makes you feel good, makes you feel like you're doing something right. And like I said earlier, once I'd be excited to have hundreds and eventually 1,000 or more students out there, if that's ever even possible with student numbers nowadays. But down the road, I think when it's all said and done and I eventually retire, I think that's probably going to be the most fulfilling thing about this job, is the mentoring aspect and seeing the students succeed and go out and be successful. I really wish that some of my mentors, my academic mentors, have both passed away, and I know they'd be thrilled to know that I've gotten a position like this. And then my mentors in the industry, some people are shocked that I got it, like Weston Apfeller. I give him a hard time about that comment he made. But somebody like Darren Daly, when I was in graduate school, he was just thrilled to death. And, especially early on when I started my master's, he knew that I didn't know anything. I was just getting my master's degree. But he would still be nice enough to call and ask my opinion about things, just to kind of stay in touch. And I would do the same with him. And, I think he'd be thrilled to death knowing what I'm doing now. So I know that having mentors myself and seeing how, they've been kind of proud of things I've done, I kind of feel the same way with the people that I've been able to advise as well so far. And I look forward to having, hopefully several more out there too that I can follow and keep up with.
Continuing on that mentor path, what type of things resonated with you when you were getting mentored, and what things have resonated with your students, or have you seen anything resonate with your students that you're continuing to teach them from your mentors?
That's a good question. I do try to, I guess you learn from your experiences. So I do probably instill a lot of my experiences onto my students. I feel like I have a lot of experiences just in different environments. Going back to that example of the student that I spoke with earlier this week that's not having a great internship, I had a couple, I don't want to say a couple, I had a few bad experiences during internships where it's like, man, this is rough. How can I get through this? And, so I've kind of been through some of the things that he was talking about. And, I just speak on my own experience and, try to just guide them the best that I can. It's a tight knit industry. A big thing that I always harp on the students, because I think it's very important for them to know, like even the work that they're doing as an undergrad, their internships, like you're starting your reputation now. And if you want to be, especially because everybody has the high ambitions of being, especially if you go golf or sports fields, you want to be at the higher tier. That's what's typically as a student, that's kind of an ambition to kind of be at the higher level of professional Division I, whatever, park director of a big city park director or whatever. But if you want to be at that level, it starts now. You can't just take all of your summers off and work flooring or doing painting or something, which we've had some students do. And I'm like, what are you doing? If you're really serious about this, you need to be working on a golf course. And then, they might be complaining, well, I'm making minimum wage and I'm working 60 hours a week. That's part of it now. And, but if you set yourself up now, doing the internships and getting that experience, it's going to accelerate your way up the ladder, right? Rather than waiting, because the degree, a lot of people have degrees nowadays, and it's important, but the experience and the reputation and the networking, that's going to help you obviously move up to where you want to be a little bit faster. So that's definitely something. And, I've seen that with my own experience, because, I think I'm certainly one of the youngest assistant professors in turf out there. Took me a little bit longer to get through school, but I think I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the experiences that I have, not just the research that I've done and things like that, but I think the advantages, the network of people that I know within the industry has definitely helped me tremendously beyond just the work that I've done.
I honestly think that's probably the most underrated thing about pretty much success stories, the networking that is available to them and what they create out of it. I know, through my network, I've got a student alumni who's working in Pittsburgh now with my former boss, and kids are working on golf courses through people that I knew and stuff along those lines. That, again, just having a network that, again, stretches so far is critical to anyone's success, and I think that both the industry organizations do a great job of creating that network and creating the opportunity for that network. So I do appreciate you saying that. We asked this from most of our guests. And again, with everything, the way your mind works is I'm still trying to understand how you come up with all this stuff for the research that you do. It's incredible. If there was one thing that you could tell yourself when you first started, again, you started in sports turf and you found yourself moving into the research side of things. There was one thing you'd tell yourself at the beginning of your career. And it's not like to make things easier or anything like that, but better to understand, again, in your experience, what would that be and why?
This is a very hard question. Yeah,
it could just be, hey, Weston's gonna say that one thing that's gonna annoy you.
Yeah, for a very long time, it was, I wish I would have tried harder as an undergrad, because when I say my GPA was bad, it was bad.
I'm with you on that though, because
Yeah.
I spent a lot more time at work than in class. Kids,
Yeah.
don't listen to that. I didn't say that out loud. I'm just
Yeah. And but I take my own experience, and I don't look at just GPA when I'm evaluating the student anymore either. But yeah, that was for a very long time, especially when I started grad school and I was trying to get into grad school. That was a big, I was just struggling I almost didn't go to grad school, obviously, because I couldn't get in anywhere. And I had several professors now that I know very well. And a lot of people know across the industry kind of laughed when I told them I wanted to go to grad school. So yeah, I have a few funny stories about that. And I'm sure they're kind of thinking like Weston Appenfeller, like, well, how in the world did you do it? How are you doing what you're doing? But I kind of use that as a chip on my shoulder during grad school. And it definitely helped motivate me to do well in school. And I did do well in school. And, I think when students put their mind to things, they can accomplish it. But obviously, as an undergrad, they got other things going on. So, that was a big thing early on. Now, I don't know. I feel like I've done pretty well for myself now. Looking back on things, it kind of it shaped who, this was my goal, was to get a position like this, and it shaped all of my experiences led up to this point. I think really helped get this position, obviously. And I maybe not. I guess one thing would be maybe not work so hard, especially in grad school, because I got married in grad school. I had 2 kids in grad school. But I still feel like I had a pretty good work-life balance and all that. So I wouldn't even tell myself, that I did too much of that wrong.
Just do what you're gonna do, because you're gonna get where you want to go, right?
Yeah. It takes a lot. It's hard work. And it's constant, especially when you're young and you're building experience. That's what I'm trying to tell my grad students. Everything matters, and you always want to be building your resume because Dan Sandor was the same way. Whenever we were sharing an office, we lived together for a little while up there too during the transition period when we were both moving. But we talked about it. You only get so many opportunities at our job, in the same way with every other job out there. And whenever a job opens, you have to be prepared. If you're not prepared, you got to wait for the next one. And in academia, there's not a lot of jobs. So, I always tell my grad students, like, you got to constantly be building that resume and thinking that you can't take a semester off. You can't just like not do a presentation or try to write some kind of paper. Or, you got to always be thinking ahead and always be doing something to build up, yourself for when that time comes. And, same for undergraduate students, we're doing internships and things like that.
Absolutely. Another thing we always ask, and with you having your own students, what would you say is the best words of advice that you could give them, other than, again, build up your network and everything, and maybe not even more pointed at turf, just more pointed at, again, being the best version of themselves, and carrying them in a certain way that, again, will lead to the success and lead to the product that they want in life.
Yeah. I definitely think a work-life balance is critical. I had some family members that were in grad school at the same time I was in grad school doing something completely different. And when me and my wife told them that we wanted to start having kids, they were like, "Oh, you're gonna have kids in grad school?" I was just like, "Well, if I'm not gonna I wouldn't be having kids until like now if I didn't start back then." So it's like, why wait? That's kind of the biggest thing that I preach. Like, why wait to do things? And I try to tell myself that too. And I'm like, I'll wait till the end of the week to do this, whatever. It's like, well, I have time now. Why wait? So that's kind of what I tell students and my grad students. It's like, I want to work. They'll come up to me and say, "Hey, I want to do more presentations." I'm like, "Well, why wait? You want to do a lecture in my class?" And I'll let them take over a lecture. Or I need to write more. Well, let's reach out to the magazine and write a little blurb in a magazine. Like, why wait? If you want to do something, like, why wait to do it? Just go ahead and start doing it or work on doing it, and get it done. Why just sit on it?
I think there's only one real reason to wait, and that was COVID. So
yeah,
hopefully we're done. Hopefully, we're not gonna go there with that.
And another thing is that I'm finding out is that people are very open in this industry to help. And I'm sure you all know that. I don't think, I could reach out to somebody that they might not have a clue who I am. give them a little bit of background on what I'm trying to do. And, if I'm trying to get some information from them, I would say that 90% of the people in this industry would respond or set up a phone call, and be willing to help. And I think that's that's another big thing. So don't be afraid to ask, because you'll never know if you don't ask. And some questions might be completely ridiculous, but you never know unless you ask. And somebody else might have the same ridiculous question. So that's another big one too. And when it comes to internships, I remember the first time I got the internship with the Red Sox, and I was calling my mom. I had never moved out of the state of Kentucky. I literally grew up 15 minutes away from Lexington. So that was the farthest I ever moved. And I'm like, I get to go to Boston for a month. And, my mom started crying, like, oh my God. And, but it's because I just applied, and you can literally go wherever you want. That's why I always tell our students. I know some of you all don't want to move out of the state of Texas. You want to stay close to home, but you can literally go wherever you want and take advantage of that as a student, because interns are needed everywhere, especially in golf. And take advantage of that and experience that. I feel bad for the students that don't want to experience that, that just want to stay close to home, because it really is a life changer. And I don't think if I ever would have moved away for that very first Boston internship, I might have just stayed in Kentucky, because my dream was always to be the head field guy at Kentucky, when I started my undergrad. But that was a really eye-opening experience moving away.
Absolutely. Well, we don't want to match next time with you. We don't we don't want to keep you too long. One thing I do want to say, if you do ever need help with any research, we're actually starting to develop a facility, turfgrass research facility at our high school. We would love to be a part of whatever you need help with. We got high school athletes readily available. Whatever you're doing, we're here to help in any way. So.
Cool. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely. We'll have to work something up with Dan or Dr. Goatley.
Yeah, we should. Definitely, for sure. We can't thank you enough for taking the time. And it sounds like Franco has something to say.
I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, let us know, Franco. We want you here.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll keep in touch.
I know the money thing. I understand the money thing.
Yeah.
It's no joke. But yes, we do offer scholarships, and please do follow up with me or Mark.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, he said something about how it has to be like from Texas A&M, and if he gets 4,000, it's an in-state tuition like automatically. So.
Okay.
Well, you have to. It depends. You have to talk to people about it, but yeah, usually it's automatic. Yeah.
We'll figure.
I have no idea what we're talking about. So.
Yeah, no, but what you were saying about like just reaching out and asking questions, even if like you don't really know them, definitely hit home when like I was able to have a meeting with all of you guys one-on-one. That was awesome. I didn't expect that. So
awesome. Good. Glad to hear.
Well, again, we can't thank you enough. This has been awesome, and we really appreciate you taking the time. Again, if you ever need anything, let us know.
Yeah, will do. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. This was fun.